Hello, gamers and gamettes, and welcome to another episode of Not So Hardcore Gaming. I am your host, Jeremy, and with me today I have another new guest. Her name is Cassidy.
Hello, my name is Cassidy. I am in my 20s, and I like playing video games, as this podcast is about, but I also like drawing and listening to music.
That's awesome. And as you said, this is gaming, so it's good to have another game lover on it. And yeah, today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about maybe one or two games through it, depending, but we're going to start with good old Mario Kart Wii. Now, I think we've all played this game at one point or another, and even now it holds up quite well. So yeah, we're going to discuss it and let's get into it. Okay, so to start, we'll talk about visuals and audio, as we always do. So we'll start with the first part, the visuals. It is an older game, and even now, the graphics are still surprisingly good. You know, they hold up just as much as they did as when the game was new. You know, there's a lot of different characters in it, all who have their own unique move sets that they do. You know, they all look quite unique and quite good. And there are a lot of tracks. What would you say is your favorite track visually?
I think visually it will probably have to be Toad Factory, because that's one I mostly played a lot on, and something about it is just like really fun, especially when you're playing with your friends.
Yeah, while it's one of the most difficult tracks, I did always love the look of Rainbow Road.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, you're in space. When you fall off the track, you plummet towards the Earth as a bloody comet, and it just looks really, really good. And as I said, it holds as one of the most beautiful, and the amount of tracks there are, each of them have a lot to see. There's like little shortcuts in it. You can see things on the horizon, and it is amazingly detailed for an older game.
Definitely.
Do you have anything to add?
As you have stated, the graphics do hold up pretty well for their time, especially as this game was pretty big when the Wii was still pretty big at the time. And it's pretty much one of the most well-known games that a lot of people still talk about these days.
Yeah, exactly. It's obviously the Mario Kart series is very old now and has evolved a lot. But I would probably say this is one of the most iconic ones of it. Especially, you know, it was on a new console, which at the time was a real top technology. And yeah, it does still hold up. In terms of audio, I think every track has its own music.
Yeah, they do. Each of them having a different kind of feel to it to fit each of the tracks, and
yeah, and it's, as I say, it's greatly unique. They're all boppy, all good to hear, and you got to have good music if you're going to be playing the same tracks. Otherwise, it just gets boring, and if the music isn't done right, it can get annoying having to do the same one to play the same track. But the audio, the music for the races is all unique and genuinely quite good to listen to.
Yes, definitely.
Then, of course, you've got all the different characters they'll say one or two short phrases, and during the races, if they get hit by a shell, they'll make their own noise, and when they do tricks, you know, they have multiple noises they can make, and it adds a lot of character to them.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this was long before the gliders were added, along with the floating hover wheels in later games like Mario Kart 7 and 8.
Yeah, and it's good to see the way the game has evolved. But even though there's less features, I still think this is one of the most fun ones to play, and I think the fact that it is fairly simple actually makes it better.
Yes.
And we will at some point talk about some of the later games as well. But for the moment, as I said, the Mario Kart Wii it's a topic of today, and it to this day is one of my favorite games I've played. And just to begin, as I said, visually and auditory, I guess, I don't know, but it really does stand up. It's beautiful. It sounds good. There is a huge variety. Even the carts make different noises depending on which one it is. It is so detailed, and you can't help but appreciate it. So next, we'll talk about gameplay. So to start with, it's fairly simple, and it's always good. Simple controls, but difficult to master. You've got the turn in, which they have add-ons where you can put the remote in a wheel to turn, which changes it quite well. So it's you've got 2 accelerates, 1 reverses. Very simple because you hold it sideways. Any of the arrows uses the items. A you use to select races, whatever else. B you use to drift if you want to. So fairly simple controls, but the way you play changes it quite a bit, and you can choose auto or manual, and both will really change the gameplay significantly.
And each item that you get, it also adds on to the gameplay depending on how you use them. Like if you're, let's say, someone who just likes to go head on, you would most likely be someone who mostly uses a shell. If you're someone who's just that desperate of winning, you will either use either the blue shell or the bullet bill.
And it fits your playstyle. As well as that, if you're lagging behind, the random number generator in it will favor you more. You will get a bullet bill to help you catch up, and that it changes it quite a bit because the outcome of the race can change at any moment. And as you said, depending on how you use them, the items will work slightly differently, and it adapts to your playstyle, or more to the point, you adapt to it. And as I said, it's very, very simple, but it's difficult to master, and that's always a good thing with the game.
Exactly.
And with a game like this, it allows for a lot of competitive play. If you're playing with a family, you can really go all out if you're a really competitive person, and it's great fun.
And on the topic of the whole item thing, another thing to mention is that the game also has a mode where you can just go up against each other and not in a race but more of a battle, and so you could just spam shells everywhere, depending on how many you have, to obtain most of either the balloons or coins from your opponent.
That is one that actually is quite fun as well. The different game modes, again, that evolves the gameplay quite a bit, because different game modes, different play styles you have to use. Then, as well as that, you've got the different leagues of races. You've got 50cc, I think 100cc, and 150, and each one will get slightly more difficult. Then, as you unlock more characters and more races, you've got Mirror, where you have to do it backwards. Everything. There is so much to do that you can be playing the same game for a rather significant amount of time and still be seeing new things. And once you have finished it, it's fun enough that you can go and replay it completely, unlock everything all over again as many times as you want, and it keeps you hooked. And that's because there's so many different things you can do and so many different gameplay aspects to enjoy.
Yeah, so that's what makes it more fun. It's basically like mixing the original Mario Kart 64 with a small dip of Mario Party.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. And yeah, it really is so fun the way they've made it. And as I said, so much to do. Gameplay is beautiful. Like, you'll always enjoy playing it. Well, not everyone enjoys playing it, but you know what I mean. And yeah, it's very, very well done gameplay wise. And yeah, let's move on. So, to move on, we're going to talk about a couple of the tracks, which will be there'll be quite a few of them that we'll talk about. We'll mention like some of our favorites and try to describe them a little bit so you can get the idea of them. So we're going to start off with Coconut Mall. This is, I think, one of the very first tracks you'd play when you start this game. You've got several different cups, and this is one of the first ones. It is exactly as it describes. It's a mall. One aspect of the race I do quite like is it's got escalators, which will, if you go on the wrong one, it fights against you and slows you down. If you go the right one, you speed better. That to me was always a good aspect, and the fact that they change, it adds difficulty to the level. Visually speaking, though, it is a pretty cool looking one.
Yeah, I can definitely see a stage like this possibly being sized down to a not so large racing Mario themed game like Mario Sunshine or something.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think could be maybe where the idea of this could have come from, considering the name and the theme. It definitely looks like something that was pulled out of a possible Mario Sunshine sequel.
Yes, so visually it's a rather simple race. In terms of gameplay, there's quite a lot of variation. This for me is one of my favorites. But we'll move to another one. Now, next up, we've got Cooper Cape. This is one of the longer of the games, of the tracks rather. It's got more to it because it is a larger area. You've got underwater parts, and that is one thing I love about it. You've got two different areas of the race. You've got the above ground and the under the water, and when you go underwater, you see fish swimming around, and it just looks really quite cool. And as it's very large, so it's one of the largest in the game. And in terms of gameplay, again, the way the water flows changes how fast you go. It's similar sort of thing, and it helps to be familiar with it.
Yeah, and it also, while it does look visually appealing, another thing to mention is that in some sections of the map there are also like ramps, so you can, if you're like slightly lagging behind. But another thing is that it also has the slide-like tunnel areas, which make you feel like you're on a water slide, but except you're driving on it, and
yeah,
and they go into different kinds of directions. Like, for example, one of them can break off into either like just a straightaway path or a tunnel that's next to it before you turn to your left.
Yeah, and then there are shortcuts you can take if you want to, where it just cuts a little bit out and can help you get ahead. As I said, it's one of the larger ones. There's a lot to see on the track, and all around it looks good and feels good, and it's got a level of challenge to it. Moving on, one of my personal favorites, Mushroom Gorge. Now, obviously, one of the main reasons I like this one is, you're bouncing off mushrooms, and it's about timing. You get tricks, you get boosts. It has a level of difficulty, and one small mistake can send you over, which can lose the race. So it can be a bit more difficult for you to do, but it's in a good way. visually it's quite simple, but it's really fun to play.
Yeah, it is. But if you don't have really like the best focus and timing, then this stage can actually be one of the most challenging. Because for me, I sometimes tend to slip off on certain areas, like in the cave or just on the bouncing mushrooms in general.
Yeah, as I said, it's one of the ones where a single mistake can lose you the race, depending on who you're versing. And to me, that actually does add a lot of fun to it. You know, if it's more difficult, you have to play it more to get used to it. And so again, it's one of the smaller maps, but one of the most fun. So we'll move on to another one. Bowser's Castle. Now, visually, this one is one of the best races, and I've even seen quite a few of the races in newer games like Mario Kart 7, but I would still put this as one of the best visually. Now, this one is... It's a slightly larger one, and for me, even as someone who hasn't really played as many of the Mario games, I can definitely see it as a setting for a boss battle with him. You know, it's impressive looking. Obviously, Bowser rules it, so it's very much focused on him. You know, there's lava to avoid, there's big jumps. Visually, it's impressive, and again, has its own level of challenge to it. And being one of the longer ones, you know, it's always good to have a longer race. And this is one of my favorites, although it's another one again. One single mistake can lose you the race, and it is very easy to make mistakes on it.
It is. It's a lot more challenging than Mushroom Gorge, especially with the way that the tracks are laid out. Like 1 minute there's lava, the next minute there's a hole.
And there's lots of patches of dirt which slow you down.
Yeah, so it's more of an annoyance at times.
Yeah, it can be very annoying, but again, like for a lot of people, that adds to the challenge and adds to the appeal.
Yeah,
and I can definitely see that. But this is one I have often found myself quitting because of.
Yeah, but if you want to really rage quit, just go 150cc, then you're immediately upset.
Yeah, it's a bastard to beat sometimes. So moving on to another one, we've just had lava, so now we'll go snow, and that is DK Summit, I think it is. This one, as I said, snow, very, very snowy. I think this is one of the longest races. I've mentioned quite a few of them being particularly long, but this one is extra long. You know, there are big jumps. You go through a canyon and you get fired to the top of the summit.
Which, in my opinion, is actually the most fun of the stage, because you just start off with immediately flying in the air.
Yeah, it's really good fun to just be shot from the base to the top of a mountain. It just looks pretty cool. There are lots of patches of thick snow throughout this, which, if you go over, will slow you down. And they are everywhere. But you've also got lots of little snow hills to get tricks on. There's one particular patch where you just get a bunch of those, and it is so fun. You're just waving the remote up and down. This is one where I do find quite fun.
And I think, now that I think about it, the whole part with the snowboarding section area, I think that could have maybe been possible foreshadow to the second Mario and Sonic at the Olympics game, because that game also happens to have mini games where you can snowboard and do tricks in the air, and that game wasn't out at the time.
Yeah, and as well as that, visually they are quite similar. I wouldn't have actually thought of that if you hadn't mentioned it.
Yeah,
That's quite interesting. Yeah,
it just came to mind as soon as you brought it up.
Yeah, like the layout is sort of similar. It's quite good. So we actually won't do too many more. But we talked about some of our favorites. Now we did mention earlier about Rainbow Road. Now, as I said, this one is known as the longest and most difficult track in the entire game. I think numbers don't go high enough to tell how many people would have rage quit because of this track. But honestly, it's one of my favorites because it is really challenging.
Yeah, it is. And it's also very visually appealing each time you play it.
Yeah, it's like you're in space. Everybody loves space. You see Earth, like, behind the track. And obviously, Rainbow Road describes the track itself. As that there are big holes in it as well. There are some jumps you go over where if you hit at just the wrong angle, you fall and die. And it adds a huge amount of challenge, but great appeal to it. The only one I would consider similarly difficult is Moonview Highway, where you have to avoid all the cars.
And as someone who hasn't played most of the earlier Mario Kart games, I can say that this is honestly more challenging than Rainbow Road in the Game Boy game, because that one's mostly just twists and turns, where this one is a bunch of hills and also has some gaps in it. So it's basically a big step up from that game.
Yeah, and that of course is in terms of how powerful the console is, but it's a good upgrade. And as I said, this is one of my personal favorites, but it's also technically one of my least favorites, depending on how you look at it. But a wonderful track. Now, last we'll talk about is Wario's Gold Mine. This one is on a precocious level. It's one we found ourselves playing a lot at my home, with my family, and this one always annoyed me a lot. This is one of the most treacherous ones. It's very, very easy to fall off, and I would honestly put this, even with Rainbow Road, as the hardest.
It wasn't that much of a challenge for me. Sure, it did get annoying at certain points, but
I think it's sort of certain places, like when the bats come out and hit you. It's another one where you can have a smooth run and do really well, but once you stuff up once, you end up stuffing up a lot. There are many different obstacles throughout it, many different parts where there's no railing, so you can easily fall off. It's just one where you can very, very easily fall off. Visually, again, it's beautiful, but in terms of just gameplay, quite difficult in the end.
Yeah, definitely.
So those are some of our favourite tracks. I hope we've described them well. And yeah, so as I said, that those are the tracks. There are a lot of the tracks on there. They're all quite detailed, all quite fun. Each have their own appeal, and yeah, done absolutely beautiful. But moving on, we'll just go straight to items. Now, this is one of the other very important aspects of the gameplay. There are a lot of different items which will obviously do different things that if they did the same thing would be weird. But, there's a rather large, probably smaller, but the way you use them changes it. But there's a very small amount of actual items you use, but there's not much room for any more. But there's enough to keep it exciting, enough to change the gameplay well. Sorry, I'm just pulling up a list at the moment to remember all of them. So you've got two different types of items on them. One, which you use to sabotage the other players. They're like your green shells, red shells, fake items. And you've got your own ones which help you. And that's the mushrooms, like golden mushroom, the star, bullet bill, those types of things. So as there are the two different categories of them. And again, these are from a random number generator. So depending where you are in the race, you can get a bullet bill, for example, you will get quite often in 11th or 12th. Whereas when you're in first, you only tend to get green shells and bananas. So I like the way that system is done.
Yeah, and I like how it's all randomly generated because either sometimes it could give you the same items more than once instead of just picking a different one because it is a random generator, but
it's very much luck based. Yeah,
it's basically one of the most base random generators I've seen so far.
It's one of the ones where a lot of the games you play nowadays, the random number generator, it seems like it's just out to not specifically to sabotage you. Like some of them, the way it's done, you never get what you need, and it can seem a bit unfair. But with this one, it's done very well that, you look at it and you think, hey, fair enough. You very rarely get a mushroom in first place, but it happens. In last place, you will always get something which helps you. The random number generator is designed to help you rather than to go against you, and I think that's done a lot better for this one. Now, we're not going to go through all of the items on the list, but as I said, you've got your base ones, you've got different types of mushrooms to speed you up, different types of shells which act differently when you use them. You've got the traps that you lay. There's 3 or 4 different categories of them, all affected differently, and it's fun. There's enough to keep it exciting. That's about it for the items. I just wanted to briefly mention, the system that they've used for that, which is quite good. We'll just move on to really the last thing. The last thing is the characters. They're your usual characters that you have in really almost any Nintendo game. You've got Princess Peach, Daisy, Mario, Luigi, Bowser, Yoshi, the ones that we all know very well. Then you've got obviously like Baby Luigi and others. Love them absolutely. Then you've got a few extras. Like one thing I do like, you can have your Mii character.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites because I happen to love the Miis. I played pretty much most of the Mii games, and it always just feels fun having a little avatar of yourself put into like the Mario universe, just to drive around or jump or do whatever they're put into, and just be yourself and just have fun. And
yeah, it's a cool little feature. You have to unlock that option, which gives you more reason to play other parts of it. After that, you've got other characters which I don't think people would be as familiar with from the main characters, like what's his name? Funky Kong is one of them. Sorry, I had to look up his name because it was going to bother me. I don't think many people are familiar with Funky Kong, people are more familiar with Diddy Kong, but you've got ones which are basically slightly different variations of other characters. You've got Toad, Toadette, Birdo, similar ones. I don't think they're as common in the other series, are they?
No, they're not, sadly. Well, some of them are, like Toad and Toadette, like they have been in some of the recent Mario games, but as for Daisy, she's rarely used unless it's a sports game these days.
Yeah. So like the characters is a good list of characters, both familiar and not. And as I mentioned earlier, like they all have their own personality. They'll say different things, they'll celebrate differently, and even to look at it slightly differently as well, baby Luigi reacts differently to adult Luigi. And I always like those little details. They're all just a little bit unique. Some of them are just absolutely adorable. Like, as I said, baby Luigi is very cute. And yes, I love that they went and actually put in a personality for every character.
Yeah, I like how each character has their own little animation every time you do a trick with them in the air. Like, for example, Mario would, I think, sometimes do his iconic jump pose, but in a more sitting position, since he's in a cart and all. And some characters would even do some tricks like standing on doing a one-hand handstand for like a few seconds.
Yeah, and that plays into like the personality, and that's one thing I always like. There's no story to the game, but the characters still have their own personality that you get just from the tricks they do, the celebrations like that. It's really quite detailed, and I very much enjoy it. That's pretty much everything about this game that we can talk about. It's one, as I said, pretty much everybody's heard of it, everybody's played it, well, almost everybody. And if you haven't played it, I do greatly recommend getting out the Wii again and playing it, because to this day it holds up as a really fun and good game. And I think should all take time to appreciate it even now. Lovely. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's pretty much all you can say about that. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah. So greatly recommend it. Thank you for listening, and thank you for coming on, Cassidy.
Hey, no worries.
And I am quite sure we'll be seeing you again soon. And with that, this is Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm Jeremy, signing off.